The suds burned her cracked hands as Daisy Foster scrubbed another plate in the murky water, wondering if this was all life would ever be for her in Weaverville, California, when the door to the saloon kitchen swung open and a tall cowboy stepped inside, tracking dust across the floor she had just mopped, and said something that would change everything. "Miss, I apologize for coming back here, but I had to speak with you directly." His voice was deep and respectful, and when Daisy turned to look at him, she noticed he had removed his hat and held it against his chest. His dark hair was slightly damp with sweat from the June heat of 1878, and his brown eyes held an earnest quality she rarely saw in the rough men who frequented the Golden Nugget Saloon. "You should not be in here," Daisy said quietly, glancing toward the door that led to the main saloon room where her employer, Mr. Patterson, held court behind the bar. "If Mr. Patterson sees you, I will lose my position. Then I will speak quickly." The cowboy took a step closer but maintained a respectful distance. "My name is Henry Quinn. I have been coming to this establishment for 3 weeks now, always taking my meals at the corner table. I have watched you work without complaint from dawn until well past midnight. I have seen how the other workers treat you, how Patterson speaks to you, and I cannot stand by any longer without offering you an alternative." Daisy set down the plate she had been washing and dried her hands on her apron, which was more patches than original fabric. She was 22 years old and had been working at the saloon for 4 years, ever since her father died in a mining accident and left her with nothing but debt. Her mother had passed when she was young, and she had no siblings, no family to turn to. The work at the Golden Nugget was hard and the pay was meager, but it kept a roof over her head in the small room she rented above the general store. "An alternative?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was a slender woman with auburn hair that she kept tied back in a simple bun, and green eyes that had seen too much hardship for someone so young. "What kind of alternative could you possibly offer to a woman like me? An honest one." Henry Quinn squared his shoulders. "I own a ranch about 15 miles north of town. It is not the largest spread, but it is mine. Bought with wages I saved working cattle drives for 10 years. I have 200 acres, a small herd of cattle, some chickens, and a house that needs a woman's touch. I need help running the place, and I can offer you fair wages, your own room, and respectful treatment." Daisy stared at him, trying to understand what he was truly proposing. "You want to hire me as a housekeeper. I want to offer you a chance at a different life," Henry said carefully. "I will not lie to you and say the work would be easy. Ranch life is demanding. But you would be working for yourself, building something, not just surviving day to day. You would have fresh air, decent food, and nobody would speak to you the way Patterson does." Before Daisy could respond, the kitchen door slammed open and Mr. Patterson himself stormed in, his face red with anger. He was a portly man with thinning hair and a perpetual scowl. "Quinn, what in the blazes are you doing in my kitchen harassing my worker?" Henry turned to face him calmly. "I was offering Miss Foster employment, which is hardly harassment." "She has employment here," Patterson snapped. "Now get out before I have you thrown out." "I will leave, but first I would like to hear Miss Foster's answer." Henry looked back at Daisy. "What do you say? Will you at least consider my offer? I will be at the hotel until tomorrow afternoon. If you decide you want to take a chance, meet me there and we can discuss the details properly." Daisy felt her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to escape the endless drudgery of the saloon. But another part of her was terrified. What did she really know about this man? He seemed respectful, but appearances could be deceiving. And yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw something genuine there, something honest. "I will think about it," she finally said. Henry nodded, placed his hat back on his head, and tipped it to her before turning to leave. Patterson grabbed his arm, but Henry simply looked down at the hand on his sleeve and then at Patterson's face. Something in his expression made the saloon owner release him immediately. Henry walked out without another word. "You even think about leaving, and I will make sure no one in this town will hire you for anything," Patterson hissed at Daisy. "You still owe me for the advance I gave you when your father died. You walk out that door without paying that back, and I will have the law on you." Daisy felt her stomach drop. She had forgotten about that debt. Patterson had given her $50 for her father's burial, money she had been paying back slowly over the past 4 years. She still owed him $20, a sum that might as well have been $200 given her wages. He paid her $12 a month and took 8 of it for the debt, leaving her barely enough to pay for her room and buy food. "I remember the debt, Mr. Patterson," she said quietly, returning to her dishes. "Good. Now get back to work. Those glasses will not wash themselves, and the evening rush is about to start." Daisy worked through the evening in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities. $20. That was what stood between her and a chance at a new life. She had $4 saved, hidden in a tin under the loose floorboard in her rented room. Where could she possibly get $16 more? The saloon grew crowded as night fell, and the noise from the main room was deafening. Men gambling, drinking, shouting, occasionally fighting. Daisy washed glasses and plates, pots and pans in an endless cycle. Her back ached, her hands were raw, and exhaustion settled over her like a heavy blanket. But her mind kept returning to Henry Quinn and his offer. Around midnight, when she finally finished her work and was preparing to leave through the back door, one of the saloon girls, a woman named Margaret who was only a few years older than Daisy, came into the kitchen. Margaret had always been kind to her, sharing food when she could and offering quiet words of encouragement. "I heard what happened earlier," Margaret said, leaning against the door frame. "The cowboy who offered you work." "News travels fast," Daisy said wearily. "Everything travels fast in a place like this." Margaret crossed her arms. "Are you going to take his offer?" "I cannot. I still owe Patterson $20. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then she reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I have been saving for 3 years, trying to get enough to go to San Francisco and start over. I have $37. "Margaret, no, listen to me." Margaret pressed the pouch into Daisy's hands. "I see myself in you 5 years ago. I thought I would just work here for a little while, save some money and move on. But time has a way of slipping past, and before you know it, years have gone by and you are still in the same place. If you have a chance to get out now, you take it. You take it and you do not look back." "I cannot take your savings," Daisy protested, tears springing to her eyes. "That is your future." "Then make it our future. You get out of here, you build a life, and when you are settled, you send the money back to me. I will wait. I have waited this long, a little longer will not hurt." "But you, Daisy, you still have a chance. Do not waste it." Daisy looked down at the pouch in her hands, feeling its weight. "Margaret, I do not know what to say. Say you will go. Say you will meet that cowboy tomorrow and take his offer. Say you will not end up like me, trapped in this place, watching your life pass by." "I will pay you back," Daisy said fiercely, closing her hands around the pouch. "Every penny, I swear it." "I know you will." Margaret smiled, though her eyes were sad. "Now go get some rest. You have a big day tomorrow." Daisy walked back to her small room above the general store, the leather pouch clutched tightly in her hand. She did not sleep much that night, lying awake and thinking about what she was about to do. Was she making a terrible mistake? Or was this the chance she had been praying for? When dawn broke over Weaverville, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Daisy had made her decision. She washed her face with water from the pitcher on her dresser, put on her only other dress, a simple brown calico that was worn but clean, and gathered her few possessions. She did not own much. 2 dresses, a nightgown, a brush, a few undergarments, a photograph of her parents, and a Bible that had belonged to her mother. Everything fit into a small canvas bag. She went to the saloon early before it opened for the day. Patterson was in his office going over his books. Daisy knocked on the door frame and he looked up with a scowl. "What do you want? You are not supposed to be here for another hour." "I am leaving, Mr. Patterson. I have come to settle my debt." She pulled out the $20 from Margaret's pouch and placed it on his desk. Patterson's eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. "Where did you get this money?" "That is not your concern. The debt is paid. I am free to go." He snatched up the money, counting it carefully. "You are making a mistake, girl. You think that Cowboy is going to treat you any better than I have. Men are all the same. He will work you to the bone and pay you in scraps." "Perhaps," Daisy said calmly, though her heart was racing. "But that will be my mistake to make, not yours to decide." She turned and walked out of the saloon for the last time, feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. The morning air was crisp and clean, and the town was just beginning to wake up. She walked to the hotel, a 2-story building at the end of Main Street, and asked the clerk if Henry Quinn was available. "Room 7, 2nd floor," the clerk said, looking at her curiously. Daisy climbed the stairs, her bag clutched in her hand, and knocked on the door to room 7. She heard footsteps, and then the door opened. Henry Quinn stood there, dressed in clean clothes, his hair still damp as though he had just washed. He looked surprised to see her. "Miss Foster." "Mr. Quinn, I have come to accept your offer if it still stands." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his serious features. "It most certainly does. Please come in. We should discuss the particulars." Daisy hesitated. It was not proper for her to enter a man's hotel room unchaperoned. But then again, she was about to ride out to his ranch alone with him. The usual proprieties seemed less important than they once had. She stepped inside and Henry left the door open, maintaining respectability. The room was simple but clean, with a bed, a dresser, and 2 chairs by the window. He gestured for her to take one of the chairs while he sat in the other. "I want to be completely honest with you about what you are agreeing to," Henry began. "The ranch is 15 miles from town, up in the foothills. The house is small, just 3 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen, a bedroom, and a spare room that you would have for yourself. The work would include cooking, some cleaning, tending the vegetable garden, caring for the chickens, and helping with whatever else needs doing. During branding season and roundup, the work would be harder. I sometimes hire a few hands to help, and you would need to cook for them as well." "What would my wages be?" Daisy asked. $20 a month plus room and board," Henry said. "And before you worry, I want to make it clear that I expect nothing from you beyond honest work. Your room will be your own with a lock on the door if that makes you more comfortable. I am offering you employment, Miss Foster, nothing more." $20 a month was more than she had ever made in her life. At the saloon, after Patterson took his cut, she had barely been surviving on $4 a month. This would allow her to save money, to perhaps one day have real choices about her future. "There is one more thing I should tell you," Henry continued. "I was married once, 7 years ago. My wife, Caroline, died in childbirth along with our baby. I have been alone since then, focused on building the ranch. I am not looking for a replacement for her. I am simply looking for help and offering you a fair wage for fair work." Daisy saw the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his wife and felt a surge of sympathy. I am sorry for your loss, Mr. Quinn. Thank you, and please, if we are to work together, call me Henry. Then you should call me Daisy. Daisy. He said her name carefully, as though testing how it felt. Do you have any questions before we finalize this arrangement? What if it does not work out? What if you find my work unsatisfactory, or I find the situation unsuitable? Then either of us can end the arrangement with 2 weeks' notice. That seems fair, does it not? Daisy nodded. It was more than fair. It was more fairness than she had experienced in years. Then I accept your offer, Henry. When do we leave? I need to purchase some supplies, which should take about 2 hours. Can you be ready by then? I am ready now. She gestured to her small bag. This is everything I own. Something flickered in Henry's eyes, an emotion she could not quite read. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. Then let us get you something to eat while I gather the supplies. You look like you could use a proper meal. They went to a small restaurant near the hotel, and Henry ordered breakfast for both of them. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy, and coffee. Daisy could not remember the last time she had eaten so much food at once. At the saloon, she survived on scraps from the kitchen, whatever was left over after the customers had been served. While they ate, Henry told her more about the ranch. He had been born in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had died when he was 16, and he had headed west, working various jobs before finding his calling as a cattleman. He had saved every penny for 10 years, living frugally, until he had enough to buy his land. That had been 3 years ago, and he had been building the ranch slowly and steadily ever since. What about you? Henry asked. How did you end up in Weaverville? Daisy told him about her father, who had come to California during the gold rush of 1849. By the time Daisy was born in 1856, the easy gold was long gone, but her father had stayed, working in the mines and barely scraping by. Her mother had died of fever when Daisy was 8, and she and her father had struggled along together until his accident 4 years ago. I am sorry, Henry said quietly. You have had a hard life. Many people have had harder, Daisy replied. At least I am alive and healthy. That is more than many can say. After breakfast, Henry went to gather his supplies while Daisy waited outside the general store. She saw Margaret walking down the street and waved to her. Margaret hurried over, looking anxious. You are really doing it, Margaret said. You are leaving. I am, and I meant what I said last night. I will pay you back, Margaret, every penny. I believe you. Margaret hugged her quickly. Be careful out there, Daisy, and be happy. Promise me that. I promise to try. Henry returned with a wagon loaded with supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, beans, dried beef, and various tools and hardware. He helped Daisy onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Weaverville, Daisy looked back at the town that had been her home for 22 years. She felt no sadness at leaving it behind, only a strange sense of anticipation for what lay ahead. The road north wound through hills covered with pine and oak trees. The day was warm but not oppressively hot, and a gentle breeze kept them comfortable. Henry was not much of a talker, but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. Daisy found herself relaxing for the first time in years, watching the landscape roll by, breathing air that did not smell of tobacco smoke and spilled whiskey. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat some of the bread and cheese Henry had packed. They sat in the shade of a large oak tree, and Henry pointed out various landmarks: a creek where the water ran clear and cold, a meadow where deer liked to graze, a rocky outcropping where golden eagles nested. The ranch is just beyond that ridge, he said, pointing to a line of hills in the distance. Another hour, perhaps a little more. It is beautiful country, Daisy said softly. It is. harsh sometimes, especially in winter, but beautiful. When they crested the final ridge, Daisy got her first look at Henry's ranch. It sat in a broad valley surrounded by rolling hills, with a creek running along the eastern edge. The house was indeed small, built of logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. She could see cattle grazing in the distance, maybe 60 or 70 head. "It is not much yet," Henry said, and she could hear both pride and uncertainty in his voice. "But it is a start." "It is wonderful," Daisy said, and meant it. After years of living in a tiny room above a store, looking out at a dusty street, this seemed like paradise. Henry drove the wagon up to the house and helped her down. The front door was unlocked, and he pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter first. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. The main room was larger than she had expected, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, some rough shelves, and a kitchen area with a cast iron stove. Everything was clean but sparse, clearly the home of a man who lived alone and cared more about function than comfort. "Your room is through here," Henry said, leading her to a door on the left side of the main room. He opened it to reveal a small space with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. The bed had a simple frame but a decent mattress, and there were blankets folded at the foot of it. "I know it is not fancy," Henry said. "It is perfect," Daisy said, setting her bag on the bed, and it was. It was hers, private and clean and safe. "Thank you, Henry." "Thank me after you have been here a week and realize how much work there is to do," he said with a slight smile. "But you are welcome. The other bedroom is mine, and there is an outhouse about 50 yards behind the house. The well is beside the barn and the pump works well. I will show you around properly tomorrow, but for now, I imagine you are tired from the journey. I am accustomed to working long hours. What would you like me to start with?" Henry looked at her for a long moment. "Daisy, you just left your entire life behind. You are allowed to take an afternoon to settle in. The work will still be here tomorrow." His kindness was almost harder to bear than cruelty would have been. Daisy felt tears prick her eyes and turned away so he would not see. "Thank you," she managed. "I will bring in the supplies and tend to the horses. You make yourself at home." After Henry left, Daisy sat on the bed and allowed herself to cry, just for a few minutes. She cried for the years she had lost at the saloon, for her father and mother, for all the hardship and loneliness. But they were not entirely sad tears. Mixed in was relief and hope and gratitude. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. She washed her face with water from the pitcher on the washstand, then unpacked her few belongings. Her dresses went into the dresser, her brush on top of it. She placed her mother's Bible on the small table beside the bed and propped the photograph of her parents against the wall. The room already felt more like home than any place she had lived in years. When she went back into the main room, she found Henry putting away supplies. Without being asked, she began helping him, learning where things went. The pantry was better stocked than she had expected, with jars of preserved fruit and vegetables, sacks of flour and cornmeal, and slabs of bacon hanging from hooks. "Did you preserve these yourself?" she asked, holding up a jar of peaches. "I am not entirely helpless," Henry said with a smile. "I grew up with 3 older brothers. We all learned to cook and clean. But yes, it will be nice to have someone who knows what they are doing. My biscuits are like rocks and my stew is passable at best. I am no fancy cook, but I can make decent food from simple ingredients," Daisy said. "My mother taught me before she died." They worked together until all the supplies were stored away, and then Henry showed her around the outside of the ranch. The barn was well built and housed 2 horses, the ones that had pulled the wagon, plus a saddle horse named Rusty. The chickens were Rhode Island Reds, a dozen of them, and they had already settled into their coop for the evening. The creek water was clear and cold, and Henry explained that it never ran dry, even in the hottest part of summer. "The cattle are out on the range right now," he said. "I check on them every day, make sure they have water and are not straying too far. In a few weeks, we will need to drive them to higher pasture for the summer. That is when I will hire a few extra hands." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they returned to the house. Daisy insisted on making supper, and Henry did not argue. She found potatoes, onions, and some dried beef, and made a simple but hearty stew. She mixed up biscuits, which turned out better than she had hoped, and made coffee. They ate at the wooden table, and Henry complimented her cooking sincerely. "This is the best meal I have had in months," he said. "You have already earned your wages." "Wait until tomorrow when I have had time to plan properly," Daisy said. "I saw you have flour and lard. I can make a pie if you have any more of those preserved peaches. There are 6 jars left from last summer. You are welcome to use whatever you need." After supper, Daisy cleaned up while Henry sat by the fire and mended a piece of tack. The domesticity of the scene struck her as both strange and comfortable. This was what normal life was supposed to be like, she realized. People living and working together, sharing meals and quiet evenings. She had forgotten such things existed. When she finished washing the dishes, she stood uncertain in the middle of the room. It was only 8 o'clock, far earlier than she usually finished work at the saloon, and she did not know what to do with herself. "You should rest," Henry said, looking up from his work. "I know I said you are used to long hours, but you have had an eventful day. There is no shame in going to bed early. What time should I wake to make breakfast?" "Whenever you wake naturally. We will figure out a routine as we go." "Do not worry so much, Daisy. You are not at the saloon anymore." She nodded and went to her room, closing the door behind her. She changed into her nightgown and lay down on the bed, expecting to fall asleep immediately. But despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept racing, going over everything that had happened. Just this morning, she had been washing dishes in that dingy kitchen, and now she was lying in a comfortable bed in her own room at her ranch in the foothills. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. But it was not a dream. When morning light came through her window, she woke to birdsong and the sound of Henry moving about in the main room. She dressed quickly and went out to find him building up the fire in the stove. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I did not wake you." "No, I am used to rising early." She moved to the stove. "Let me do that. You must have other work to attend to." "I do need to check on the cattle. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course." After Henry left, Daisy set about making breakfast. She mixed up flapjacks and fried some bacon, made coffee, and even scrambled some eggs from the chickens. When Henry returned an hour later, looking pleased that all the cattle were accounted for, he praised her cooking again. Over the next several days, they fell into a comfortable routine. Henry would rise early and do the morning chores, feeding the horses, checking the cattle, milking the cow he kept in the barn. Daisy would make breakfast and they would eat together while planning the day. Then Henry would head out to work on various projects around the ranch, mending fences, clearing brush, or working with the horses. Daisy would clean the house, tend the vegetable garden, care for the chickens, and prepare meals. In the evenings, they would have supper together and sometimes sit by the fire, talking quietly about their days. Daisy found herself settling into ranch life more easily than she had imagined. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way her work at the saloon had never been. She could see the results of her labor: a clean house, a thriving garden, fresh eggs every morning. And Henry was true to his word. He treated her with unfailing respect and courtesy, never raising his voice or making demands. He asked rather than ordered, thanked her for her work, and seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Daisy was in the garden weeding when Henry came back from town with the wagon. He had gone to Weaverville to sell some eggs and butter and purchase more supplies. When he climbed down from the wagon, he was carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "I got something for you," he said, handing it to her. Daisy wiped her hands on her apron and took the package, surprised. "What is it? Open it and see." She unwrapped the paper to find a beautiful piece of fabric, a deep blue cotton printed with tiny white flowers. There was also thread, needles, and buttons. Her eyes widened. "Henry, this is too much. You only have 2 dresses and they are both worn thin. I thought you might like to make yourself something new. If you do not sew, we can find a seamstress in town." "I sew," Daisy said softly, running her hand over the fabric. It was the prettiest cloth she had ever owned. "But you do not need to buy me things beyond my wages. Consider it a bonus for doing such fine work. The house has never looked better, the meals are excellent, and you work harder than anyone I have ever known. You deserve something nice." Daisy felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry more easily now than she had in years, as though kindness had unlocked something in her that had been frozen for a long time. "Thank you, Henry. This is very thoughtful." That evening, after supper was cleaned up, Daisy got out her mother's old scissors and began cutting out a pattern for a new dress. Henry sat by the fire, watching her work. "My wife was a fine seamstress," he said quietly. "She could make anything. She made all her own clothes and mine too." It was the first time he had mentioned his wife since that initial conversation at the hotel. Daisy looked up from her work. "You must miss her very much." "I do. Not as sharply as I once did, but yes, she was a good woman. We met in Missouri when I was 19 and she was 18. We married within 6 months. Everyone said we were too young, too hasty, but it felt right. We had 3 good years together before she—" He trailed off, staring into the fire. "I am sorry," Daisy said. "I cannot imagine losing someone you love like that. Have you ever been in love?" Henry asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Forgive me, that is too personal a question." "No, it is all right." Daisy set down her sewing. "I thought I was once. There was a young man, a minor, when I was 18. He said he loved me, made all sorts of promises. But when my father died and I had nothing, he disappeared. I have not thought about him in years. He was a fool." Daisy smiled slightly. Perhaps he was just practical. What use is love when you are starving? Love should mean something, even in hard times, especially in hard times. They were both quiet for a while, and then Daisy returned to her sewing. But the conversation stayed with her. She found herself thinking about Henry's words, about love and loyalty and what they meant. She also found herself noticing things about Henry that she had not paid attention to before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he handled the horses, the quiet strength in everything he did. She was developing feelings for him, she realized with a start. It was not something sudden or dramatic, but rather a gradual awareness that had been growing since she arrived. She looked forward to their meals together, to their evening conversations. She liked the sound of his voice, the way he treated her as an equal, the kindness in his eyes. She felt safe with him, and more than that, she felt seen. He noticed when she was tired, when something pleased her, when she was lost in thought. He paid attention in a way no one ever had before. But what did he feel? Was she simply an employee to him, or might he develop feelings for her as well? She tried to push the thoughts away. It was too soon, too complicated. She had only been here 2 weeks. She should focus on her work, on building her savings, on creating stability in her life. Romance was a luxury she could not afford. The weeks passed, and summer settled over the ranch. The days grew hotter, and the work grew harder. Henry hired 3 men to help with moving the cattle to higher pasture, and Daisy found herself cooking for 5 instead of 2. The men were respectful but rough, and she was grateful when they rode out each day after breakfast, leaving her alone at the ranch. One of the men, a fellow named Jake Turner, seemed to pay her particular attention. He would linger after meals, trying to strike up conversations, complimenting her cooking excessively. Daisy found him tiresome but tried to be polite. She was glad when Henry noticed and quietly told Jake that Daisy's time was her own and he should not bother her. "Thank you," Daisy said to Henry after Jake had left, looking embarrassed. "He does not take hints well." "If he troubles you again, tell me immediately," Henry said, his voice harder than she had ever heard it. "I will not have you uncomfortable in your own home. Your own home." The words warmed her. This had become her home, she realized. Not just a place she worked, but a place she belonged. The thought was both wonderful and frightening. The cattle were successfully moved to summer pasture, and the extra hands were paid and sent on their way. Life returned to its peaceful routine, just Daisy and Henry working together, sharing meals, talking in the evenings. The blue dress was finished, and Daisy wore it one Sunday when Henry suggested they ride into town for church services. She had not been to church in years, having no decent clothes and no time. But now she had both. Henry looked at her when she emerged from her room in the new dress, and something flickered in his eyes. "You look lovely," he said simply. At church, Daisy was aware of the curious stares and whispered conversations. Everyone in Weaverville knew she had been working at the saloon, and now here she was, arriving with the respectable rancher Henry Quinn. She kept her head high and ignored the gossip. After the service, several of the church ladies approached her with questions thinly veiled as pleasantries. Henry stayed close by her side, his presence a quiet support. On the ride back to the ranch, Henry was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "I am sorry about the busybodies. Small towns thrive on gossip. I am used to it. People have always talked about me. It is not fair. You have done nothing wrong." "I worked in a saloon, Henry. In the eyes of respectable society, that is wrong enough. Then respectable society is full of hypocrites. Those men who look down their noses at you this morning, half of them drink at that saloon every Saturday night." Daisy smiled. "You are angry on my behalf." "I am. You deserve better than judgment from people who do not know you. You know me. That is enough." Henry looked at her and something passed between them, a moment of connection that felt significant. But then he looked away and the moment passed. That night, Daisy lay in bed unable to sleep. Her feelings for Henry had grown stronger, undeniable now. She was falling in love with him, perhaps had already fallen, but she had no idea if he felt the same. He was kind to her, but he was kind by nature. He had been hurt badly by his wife's death, and perhaps he was not ready to open his heart again, or perhaps he simply did not see her that way. She was his employee, after all, nothing more. The next morning at breakfast, Henry seemed distracted. He barely ate, just pushed his food around his plate and drank his coffee in silence. Daisy wondered if she had done something wrong, if perhaps he had sensed her feelings and was uncomfortable. "Is something troubling you?" she finally asked. Henry looked up, startled. "What? No, I mean yes, but not in the way you think." He set down his fork. "Daisy, we need to talk." Her heart sank. This was it. He was going to tell her the arrangement was not working, that she needed to leave. She braced herself. "Of course. I have been thinking about this for weeks now, trying to decide the right thing to do," Henry began. I brought you here to work for me, and that was my honest intention. But somewhere along the way, things changed. At least they changed for me." Daisy's heart was pounding now. "What do you mean?" Henry took a deep breath. "I have feelings for you, Daisy. More than just respect for a good worker, more than just friendship. I find myself looking forward to our meals together, to our conversations, to simply being near you. I think about you when I am out on the range. I worry about you working too hard. I want to make you smile, to see you happy." He paused, looking vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I know this complicates things. I know I am your employer and you might feel pressured to respond in a certain way. If these feelings are not mutual, we can pretend this conversation never happened and continue as we have been. But I had to tell you the truth. I could not keep it inside any longer." Daisy stared at him, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "Henry," she said softly, "I have feelings for you too. I have been trying to ignore them, telling myself it was too soon, too complicated. But the truth is, I have been falling in love with you since almost the first day I arrived here." The relief and joy on Henry's face was unmistakable. "Truly, truly. You have shown me more kindness and respect than anyone ever has. You have given me not just a job, but a life. How could I not love you?" Henry stood up and came around the table, taking her hands and helping her to her feet. He looked down at her, his brown eyes warm and full of emotion. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Daisy whispered. He bent his head and kissed her gently, softly, a sweet kiss full of promise. Daisy felt tears on her cheeks and did not know if they were hers or his. When they broke apart, Henry pulled her into his arms and held her close. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again," he said quietly. "After Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I would just work the ranch and grow old alone. But then you came into my life, and suddenly everything feels possible again." "I know what you mean," Daisy said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I thought I would spend my life just surviving, just getting through one day and then the next. I never imagined I could be happy, truly happy." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, and then Henry pulled back slightly to look at her. "I want to court you properly, Daisy. I want to do this right. We will take our time, get to know each other even better, and when the time is right, if you are willing, I would like to marry you." "I would like that," Daisy said, smiling through her tears. "I would like that very much." Over the following months, their relationship deepened and grew. They continued to work side by side during the day, but now there were stolen kisses in the barn, held hands during evening walks, whispered conversations about their hopes and dreams. Henry told her more about his past, about his family in Missouri, about his years on the cattle drives, about his dreams for the ranch. Daisy told him about her childhood, about her father's stories of the gold rush, about her mother's gentleness and strength. In late August, Henry rode into town and returned with a small velvet box. That evening, after supper, he took Daisy outside to watch the sunset. They sat on the porch together, and Henry pulled out the box. "Daisy Foster, I love you more than I ever thought possible to love someone. You have brought light and joy back into my life. You have made this house a home. Will you marry me and be my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not fancy, but to Daisy, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Henry Quinn, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and in that moment, Daisy felt that her life had finally, truly begun. They were married in September, in the little church in Weaverville. Margaret came, weeping with happiness for her friend. A few of Henry's neighbors attended, along with some of the townspeople who had known him for years. Daisy wore a new dress. She had sewn herself from white linen that Henry had bought her, and she carried wildflowers that Henry had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Henry kissed her in front of everyone, Daisy felt a surge of joy so intense it was almost painful. She was married. She had a home, a husband who loved her, a life full of possibility. The frightened girl washing dishes in the saloon kitchen was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and had found someone who valued her. They had a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with Margaret and a few neighbors. There was food and laughter and dancing to fiddle music. When the guests finally left as the sun was setting, Daisy and Henry were alone together as husband and wife. That night, in the bedroom that was now theirs to share, Henry was gentle and patient. Daisy had known what to expect in theory but not in practice, and she was nervous. But Henry took his time, whispering words of love and reassurance, and when they finally came together, it felt natural and right. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms and Henry said, "I am the luckiest man alive." "I am pretty lucky myself," Daisy said, kissing his shoulder. Life as a married couple settled into a new, sweeter rhythm. They worked together during the day and shared a bed at night. They made plans for the future, expanding the herd, building a bigger barn, perhaps adding on to the house. In November, Daisy realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, and when she missed again, she told Henry. His face lit up with a mixture of joy and fear. "A baby," he said softly. "Daisy, that is wonderful, but are you scared after what happened to Caroline?" "I am scared," Daisy admitted, "but I am also happy. We will face this together." "I will take you to the doctor in Weaverville," Henry said firmly. "We will make sure you have the best care." "I am strong, Henry. Women have been having babies for thousands of years." "I know, but I cannot help worrying. I could not bear to lose you." "You will not lose me, I promise." The pregnancy progressed well. Daisy felt tired and sick in the early months, but by spring she was blooming with health. Her belly grew round and she felt the baby moving inside her. Henry was constantly attentive, always making sure she did not work too hard, bringing her little treats from town, talking to her belly at night. In late May of 1879, Daisy's labor began. Henry immediately rode for the doctor and the midwife, both of whom arrived in time. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Daisy was frightened, when the pain seemed unbearable, but Henry stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the baby was born. A boy, healthy and strong, with a good set of lungs that he used immediately. "You have a son," the midwife said, placing the baby in Daisy's arms. Daisy looked down at the tiny red face, at the perfect little fingers and toes, and felt overwhelming love. Henry was crying openly, touching the baby's head with a gentle finger. "He is perfect," Henry whispered. "You did it, Daisy. You are amazing." They named the baby Harrison, after Henry's father. Little Harrison was a good baby, eating well and sleeping in manageable stretches. Daisy was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. Watching Henry with his son, seeing the tenderness and love in his face, made her fall in love with him all over again. Margaret came to visit when Harrison was 2 weeks old, and she wept when she held the baby. "Look at you," she said to Daisy. "You have everything: a husband, a baby, a home. This is what I dreamed of for you." "I have not forgotten my debt to you," Daisy said. "In fact, I have been saving money. I have almost enough to pay you back." "Keep your money," Margaret said firmly. "Use it for your family. The loan was a gift, Daisy. Seeing you happy is payment enough." "Margaret, no, I insist. And I insist more. You gave me something more valuable than money. You gave me hope. Seeing that one of us could escape, could find happiness, that matters more than any dollar amount. They compromised. Daisy gave Margaret $20 and promised to help her if she ever decided to leave the saloon and start a new life. Margaret accepted with tears in her eyes. As Harrison grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch prospered. Henry expanded the herd and hired a permanent ranch hand, a young man named Tom who lived in a small cabin near the barn. Daisy managed the household and the garden, raised Harrison, and occasionally helped with the animals when needed. They were busy but content. When Harrison was 2, Daisy became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, having been through it before. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1882 she gave birth to a daughter they named Dorothy, after Daisy's mother. Dorothy had her mother's auburn hair and green eyes, and Henry doted on her shamelessly. "I have a son and a daughter," he would say, shaking his head in wonder. "How did I get so blessed? You offered a tired woman washing dishes a different kind of life," Daisy would remind him. "That is how." The years passed peacefully. Harrison grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved helping his father with the ranch work. Dorothy was more adventurous, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. In 1885, when Harrison was 6 and Dorothy was 3, Daisy gave birth to another son whom they named Michael. And 2 years after that, their family was completed with the arrival of twin girls, Ellen and Emma. The house had been expanded to accommodate the growing family, with additional bedrooms added on. The ranch had grown as well, now covering 500 acres with a substantial herd of cattle and several horses. They had 2 permanent ranch hands and hired additional help during busy seasons. Life was full and busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was good. On a warm evening in June of 1889, Daisy and Henry sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Harrison, now 10, was teaching Dorothy how to throw a rope. Michael was toddling around trying to catch the chickens, and the twins were sitting in the grass pulling up wildflowers. "You ever think about where you would be if I had not walked into that saloon kitchen 11 years ago?" Henry asked. Daisy thought about it. "Probably still there, washing dishes, growing old and bitter. Or maybe I would have died of exhaustion or illness. It is not a pleasant thought." "I think about it sometimes," Henry said. "I almost did not speak to you that day. I told myself it was none of my business, that you were just another saloon worker and I should not get involved. But something pushed me to do it anyway." "Fate," Daisy said. "Or luck, or God. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." Henry took her hand. "I love you, Daisy Quinn. More now than even on the day I married you." "I love you too, Henry. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me yourself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, their children's laughter filling the air. Daisy thought about the frightened young woman she had been, scrubbing plates in a dirty kitchen, wondering if life would ever offer her more. She thought about the courage it had taken to accept Henry's offer, to step into the unknown and trust that something better was waiting. It had been the right choice, the best choice. She had found love, real love, the kind that grew deeper with time rather than fading. She had found partnership and respect, laughter and joy. She had found a place where she belonged. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Henry called the children in for supper. They came running, noisy and energetic, and the house filled with their voices. Daisy stood at the stove, preparing the evening meal, and smiled to herself. She was washing dishes again, but this time it was in her own kitchen, in her own home, surrounded by people she loved and who loved her in return. That made all the difference. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm that Daisy had never imagined possible in those dark days at the saloon. In 1891, when their eldest Harrison was 12, Henry decided it was time to teach the boy more advanced ranching skills. Daisy watched from the house as father and son rode out together each morning, Harrison sitting tall in the saddle, trying to emulate his father's easy confidence. "He idolizes you," Daisy told Henry one evening. "He is a good boy, smart and willing to learn. He will make a fine rancher someday." "Someday is a long way off," Daisy said, touching his arm. "Let him be a boy for a while longer." Dorothy, now 9, had become Daisy's shadow in the kitchen and garden. She loved to cook and was always experimenting with new recipes. Michael, at 6, was the family's adventurer, constantly exploring the creek and hills, bringing home interesting rocks and bird feathers. The twins, Ellen and Emma, were 5 now and utterly inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and playing elaborate imaginary games. That autumn, Daisy received a letter that changed something in her heart. It was from a lawyer in Weaverville, informing her that Margaret had passed away. She had been sick for several months, and in her will, she had left everything she owned to Daisy. It was not much, just $97 and some personal effects, but the letter explained that Margaret had never married, never had children, and considered Daisy her only real friend. Daisy wept when she read the letter. She had visited Margaret several times over the years, always trying to convince her to leave the saloon and come stay at the ranch, at least for a visit. But Margaret had always declined, saying she was too old to change, too set in her ways. Now she was gone, and Daisy would never have another chance to thank her properly for the gift that had changed her life. "She gave me my future," Daisy told Henry through her tears. "Without her, I never would have been able to pay off my debt and come with you." "Then we will honor her memory," Henry said. "How would you like to do that?" Daisy thought about it. "I want to use her money to help other young women who are trapped like I was. Maybe we could set up a fund at the church, something to help women in difficult circumstances start new lives." And so they did. The Margaret Foster Memorial Fund was established, and over the years it helped dozens of women escape bad situations and start fresh. Each time Daisy heard of another woman being helped, she thought of Margaret and sent up a prayer of thanks. In 1893, a drought hit the region. The creek that had never run dry began to dwindle to a trickle. The grass turned brown and the cattle struggled. It was the first real hardship the ranch had faced in years, and it tested them all. Henry worked from dawn until long after dark, managing the herd, rationing water, trying to keep the animals alive. The ranch hands quit, finding easier work elsewhere, leaving Henry and Tom to manage alone. Daisy did what she could, helping with the animals, stretching every bit of food to make it last, keeping the children calm and occupied despite their fear. Even young Harrison, now 14, worked like a man, riding out with his father every day. There were nights when Henry came in exhausted and discouraged, wondering if they would lose everything. Daisy would hold him and remind him that they had survived worse, that they would get through this together. "We still have each other," she would say. "We still have our children. The rest is just details." The drought finally broke in late autumn with a storm that lasted 3 days. The creek swelled back to life, and the grass began to green. They had lost 20 head of cattle, a significant loss, but the majority of the herd had survived. They would recover. "I could not have done it without you," Henry told Daisy after the crisis passed. "Your strength kept me going." "We are partners," Daisy reminded him. "That is what marriage means. We face everything together." In 1895, when Harrison turned 16, a young woman and her family moved onto the neighboring ranch. The family had a daughter named Sarah, and from the moment Harrison saw her at church, he was smitten. Daisy recognized the look in her son's eyes because she had felt the same way when she first realized she loved Henry. "He is too young," Henry protested when Daisy pointed it out. "He is the same age you were when you first went west," Daisy reminded him. "And I was only a year older than he is now when I came to the ranch. That is different." "How is it different?" Henry could not come up with a good answer, so he just grumbled. But he let Harrison court Sarah properly, with supervised visits and chaperoned outings. The young couple was sweet together, and Sarah was a kind, hard-working girl who fit well with their family. Dorothy, now 13, had her own dreams. She wanted to be a teacher, and she studied hard in the little schoolhouse in town. Daisy encouraged her, remembering how her own limited education had held her back. "You can be anything you want to be," Daisy told her daughter. "The world is changing. Women have more opportunities now than when I was young." Michael, at 10, had decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, fascinated by animals and how to care for them. The twins were still young at 9, but they showed promise in art, constantly drawing pictures of the ranch and the landscape around them. Watching her children grow and develop their own dreams and personalities filled Daisy with pride. They would have better lives than she had, more choices, more opportunities. That was what she and Henry had worked for, what all the hard years had been leading to. In the summer of 1897, Harrison and Sarah were married. They were both 18 now, and they planned to build a house on the far corner of the Quinn Ranch and help run the operation. The wedding was a joyful affair, much larger than Daisy and Henry's had been. The whole community came out to celebrate, and Daisy found herself thinking about how much her life had changed. She was no longer the poor girl from the saloon that people whispered about. She was Mrs. Quinn, respected rancher's wife, mother of 5, pillar of the community. As she watched Harrison dance with his new bride, Henry came up beside her and slipped his arm around her waist. "Our boy is married," he said. "How did that happen? Seems like yesterday he was born." "Time moves fast," Daisy agreed. "We are getting older, Henry, we are." "But I would not change a single day of it." "Would you?" Daisy thought about it. "Maybe just those first 22 years before I met you. Everything since then has been exactly right." In 1899, Harrison and Sarah welcomed their first child, a son they named Henry after his grandfather. Becoming grandparents was a new experience for both Daisy and Henry, and they doted on little Henry shamelessly. "We are creating a dynasty," Henry joked, holding his grandson. "Quinn ranchers for generations to come." But not all their children would stay on the ranch. In 1900, Dorothy left for Sacramento to attend normal school and become a teacher. It was hard to let her go, but Daisy was proud of her daughter's courage and determination. Michael, now 15, was still planning to pursue veterinary medicine, and the twins talked about becoming artists in San Francisco. "They are all going to leave," Henry said one evening after Dorothy's departure. "The ranch will not be enough for them." "Of course it will not be enough," Daisy said gently. "The world is bigger now than it was when we were young. They have opportunities we never dreamed of. We should be happy for them." "I am happy and sad. Is that possible? It is called being a parent." As the new century dawned, Daisy looked back on 22 years of marriage with wonder. She was 44 years old now, and Henry was 48. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, economic downturns and personal losses. They had raised 5 children and welcomed a grandchild. They had built a successful ranch and a good life together. Some nights, lying in bed beside Henry, Daisy still thought about that moment when he had walked into the saloon kitchen and offered her a different kind of life. It had taken courage to accept, to step into the unknown with a man she barely knew. But it had been the best decision she had ever made. In 1902, Michael left for veterinary school in San Francisco, and the twins went with him to study at an art academy. The house suddenly felt empty with just Daisy and Henry rattling around in it. Harrison and Sarah had their own home now, with little Henry and a new baby daughter named Caroline, after Henry's first wife. That had been Sarah's idea, a gesture that had moved Henry to tears. "It is just us again," Henry said one evening. "Like it was in the beginning." "Not quite like the beginning," Daisy said with a smile. "We are older and grayer and hopefully a little wiser. Speak for yourself. I am as young as I ever was." Daisy laughed. "Your back was hurting just this morning from fixing that fence." A temporary condition. They settled into a new rhythm, just the two of them. Daisy had more time for her own interests now, and she began writing down stories from her life, thinking perhaps her grandchildren might want to know about their family history someday. She wrote about the saloon, about meeting Henry, about their early days on the ranch, about raising their children. It was therapeutic, looking back on everything they had experienced together. Henry spent more time with Harrison, teaching him the finer points of ranch management, preparing him to eventually take over completely. Tom, the ranch hand who had been with them for over 20 years, was now the foreman, managing the day-to-day operations with Harrison. In 1905, Dorothy returned from Sacramento with a young man named Robert, a fellow teacher. They were married in the fall, and Dorothy took a teaching position in Weaverville so she could be near her family. Michael finished veterinary school and opened a practice in Redding, about 50 miles away. The twins had started selling their artwork in San Francisco galleries and were making names for themselves. "All our children are settled and happy," Daisy told Henry. "We did well, you and I. We did very well." Harrison and Sarah's family continued to grow. By 1908, they had 4 children, and Harrison had taken over most of the ranch operations. Henry still helped out, but he was slowing down, his joints aching in the morning, his energy not what it once was. "I am getting old," he admitted to Daisy one evening. "We both are. That is what happens when you live a long, good life. I am not ready to be old. I still have things I want to do." "Like what?" Henry thought about it. "I want to travel with you, see something beyond these hills. Maybe go to San Francisco and visit Michael and the twins. Or go back to Missouri and see my brother's grave." And so they did. Over the next few years, they took several trips, leaving the ranch in Harrison's capable hands. They went to San Francisco and marveled at the bustling city. They traveled to Sacramento to visit Dorothy. They made the long journey back to Missouri, where Henry showed Daisy where he had grown up, and they visited the graves of his parents and brothers. "This is where I started," Henry said, standing in the small cemetery. "But California is where I found my life, where I found you." "I am glad you went west," Daisy said, taking his hand. "So am I." In 1912, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. Their family had grown to include 12 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch was prosperous under Harrison's management. Their other children were all successful and happy in their chosen paths. Everything they had worked for had come to fruition. On their anniversary night, they sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Daisy Quinn," Henry said, taking her hand, "I have loved you for 33 years, and I love you more today than I did yesterday." "That is quite a lot of love accumulated over all that time," Daisy said with a smile, "and I will love you for however many more years God gives us." "I love you too, Henry. You saved my life when you walked into that saloon kitchen. You gave me everything I have, everything I am." "No," Henry said firmly, You saved yourself. You had the courage to take the chance I offered. You built this life with me, worked just as hard as I did, maybe harder. Everything we have is because of both of us together." Daisy leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. She thought about the girl she had been, washing dishes with cracked hands, thinking her life would never amount to more than that. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and confident, beloved and valued. The journey from that saloon kitchen to this porch had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been worth every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt, because it had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this perfect moment of contentment and peace. Henry Quinn had offered her a different kind of life, and she had accepted. That decision had changed everything. It had given her love and family, purpose and joy. It had given her a story worth telling, a life worth living. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night breeze whispered through the pines, Daisy Foster Quinn knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Henry and Daisy both moved into their 60s, content to let their children run their own lives while they enjoyed the fruits of their long labor. They spent their days in quiet contentment, tending a small garden, reading books that Dorothy sent them, receiving visits from their grandchildren who filled the house with noise and laughter. In 1915, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a reunion. All 5 of their children came with their spouses and children. Harrison and Sarah with their 5 kids, Dorothy and Robert with their 3, Michael with his wife Clara and their 2 children, and Ellen and Emma, both now married to artists they had met in San Francisco, each with their first babies. The house could not hold everyone, so they set up tents in the yard, and for a week the ranch was alive with family. On the last evening they had a big outdoor supper. Everyone gathered around tables set up in the yard. As the sun set, Harrison stood up and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to my parents, Henry and Daisy Quinn. They started with nothing but hard work and hope, and they built all of this." He gestured around at the ranch, at the family gathered there. "Everything we have, everything we are, comes from their example. They showed us what love looks like, what commitment means, what family should be. To Ma and Pa." Everyone raised their glasses and echoed the toast. Daisy felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. She looked at Henry and saw that his eyes were wet too. "We did good," he whispered to her. "We did very good." In 1918, the world was engulfed in war, but it felt distant from their quiet corner of California. Their grandsons were the right age to fight, and several of them did go, including Harrison's eldest son, young Henry. Those were anxious times, waiting for letters, praying for safety. But God was merciful, and all their boys came home, changed by what they had seen but alive and whole. The celebration when the war ended was joyous, and the family gathered again to give thanks. Daisy was 63 now, Henry 67. They were slowing down considerably, but their minds were still sharp and their hearts still full. In the spring of 1920, Henry had a spell where his heart raced and he could not catch his breath. The doctor came and said his heart was wearing out, that he needed to take things easy. From then on, Henry spent most of his time on the porch, watching the ranch operate around him, content to observe rather than participate. Daisy was his constant companion, sitting beside him, sometimes talking, often just being present. They would reminisce about the old days, laugh about things that had seemed so important at the time but were trivial now, and marvel at how their life together had unfolded. "Do you remember the day we met?" Henry asked one afternoon. "Really met in that kitchen?" Every detail, Daisy said. You came in tracking dust across my clean floor. Henry smiled. I was so nervous. I had been working up the courage for 3 weeks to talk to you. 3 weeks. I did not know that. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. But more than that, I saw something in your eyes. Strength. Dignity. You deserved better than that place, and I wanted to give you better. You did. You gave me everything. In the fall of 1921, Henry's health declined further. He could no longer walk without assistance, and he tired easily. But his mind remained clear, and he was adamant that he did not want to go to a hospital. I want to be here on my land with my family, he said. That is all I need. The family took turns visiting, spending time with him, sharing memories and love. Harrison was there almost every day, and Daisy never left his side. On a crisp October morning, with the leaves turning gold on the aspens and the air smelling of autumn, Henry woke up and told Daisy he loved her. I have always loved you, he said. From that first moment in the saloon kitchen until right now, you made my life complete, Daisy. You made everything worthwhile. I love you too, Daisy said, holding his hand. More than words can say. I am tired now, Henry said gently. I think I am going to rest. Then rest, my love. I will be right here when you wake up. But Henry did not wake up. He slipped away peacefully in his sleep, Daisy holding his hand, their children gathered around. He was 70 years old and had lived a good, full life. The grief was profound, but Daisy took comfort in knowing that they had had 42 years together. Years filled with love and laughter, hard work and sweet rewards. They had raised 5 children, seen them prosper, welcomed grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. They had built something lasting. Henry was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the valley and the mountains beyond. At his funeral, all of Weaverville turned out, testimony to the respect he had earned over the years. Daisy stood at his graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and said a silent goodbye to the man who had given her everything. Life continued without Henry, though it was harder, lonelier. Daisy moved into a smaller house on the ranch property that Harrison and Sarah had built for her, leaving the main house to their family. She spent her days writing, gardening, and receiving visits from her children and grandchildren, who made sure she was never alone for long. In 1925, Daisy turned 70 years old. The family threw a grand party for her, with people coming from all over California to celebrate. As she looked around at all the faces, all the lives that had stemmed from her and Henry's union, she felt overwhelming gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left, Daisy sat alone on her porch and thought about her life. She had lived for 70 years, 47 of them on this ranch. She had gone from washing dishes in a saloon to being the matriarch of a large, successful family. She had known love, real love, the kind that sustained through hardship and grew stronger with time. She had seen so much change. When she was born in 1855, California was barely part of the United States. She had lived through the Civil War, Reconstruction, the settling of the West, the turn of the century, the World War. She had seen automobiles replace horses, electricity come to rural areas, women gain the right to vote. The world had transformed around her, but some things had remained constant: the land, the family, the love. In 1928, Daisy's health began to fail. She was 73 and had lived a long life, but her body was wearing out. She developed a cough that would not go away, and the doctor said her lungs were weak. She spent more time in bed, though her children made sure she was comfortable and never alone. On a warm June day, 50 years almost to the day after Henry had first offered her a different kind of life, Daisy called all her children to her bedside. "I want to tell you something," she said, her voice weak but clear. I want you to know how grateful I am for all of you. You gave my life meaning and purpose. You made every sacrifice worthwhile. You are my legacy, and I am so proud of each and every one of you." Her children wept, but Daisy smiled. "No tears. I have had a wonderful life, better than I ever dreamed possible. I am ready to go now. Your father has been waiting for me long enough." Dorothy held her hand. "Tell Daddy we love him." "I will," Daisy promised. That evening, as the sun set over the ranch one last time, Daisy Foster Quinn closed her eyes and went to join the man who had loved her. The man who had changed her life with a simple offer made in a saloon kitchen so many years ago. She was buried beside Henry on the hill, and the marker read, "Daisy Foster Quinn, 1855–1928. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she found her home." The ranch continued under Harrison's stewardship and would pass to his children and then to theirs. The Quinn family prospered through the years, spreading across California and beyond, but they always remembered their roots. They remembered Henry, who built the ranch, and Daisy, who made it a home. They remembered the love story that started when a cowboy offered a saloon worker a different kind of life, and she had the courage to accept. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the pines and the sun set over the valley, you could almost feel their presence there still. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful that would last for generations. Their story became family legend, passed down to children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond. It became a reminder that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that courage could change your life, that kindness mattered, that second chances were real. The old ranch house still stood, preserved by the family as a testament to where it all began. Visitors could walk through and see where Daisy and Henry had lived, where they had raised their children, where they had built their life together. And people would leave feeling inspired, believing that they too could find love, could build something lasting, could overcome whatever circumstances held them back. Because if a poor girl washing dishes in a saloon could become the beloved matriarch of a successful family dynasty, if a lonely cowboy could find love again after heartbreak, then anything was possible. Hope was real. Love was real. Second chances were real. And that was the greatest legacy Daisy Foster Quinn left behind. Not just the children and grandchildren who carried her blood, but the story of her life. A story that reminded people that it was never too late to change, never too late to accept a different kind of life, never too late to find the love you deserved. In the end, that moment in the saloon kitchen had mattered more than anyone could have imagined. One brave decision, one offered hand, one step into the unknown had created ripples that spread across generations. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Henry and Daisy Quinn were together again, smiling at what they had built, grateful for every moment they had shared, and thankful that on one dusty afternoon in 1878, fate had brought them together and given them both exactly what they needed: a different kind of life, and someone to share it with.